त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तिसुदेशिकेन्द्रं द्वैपायनं सूत्रकृतं मुनीन्द्रं श्रीशङ्करं भाष्यकृतं यतीन्द्रं मद्देशिकञ्चापि नमामि विद्यै। ॐ नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्यासम्प्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंशऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितप्रज्ञानघनः प्रत्यगर्तो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। Pranams everyone. So in this introduction to Vedanta series, we are reaching the last stage, where in the last class we discussed about the benefits of getting this moksha, the benefits of getting this jnana. The jnana meaning knowledge of one's own self. And by getting the benefit of this knowledge, what do we accomplish? We said there are two parts to it, which is one is Jivan Mukti and the other one is Videha Mukti. And the Jivan Mukti is basically here and now. The benefit can be experienced here and now. And we defined that as in three words. We said one is Swatantriyam, independence, where we are emotionally independent from everything. There is no dependence on anybody. Then we said there is Purnatvam, there is contentment. There is contentment at all levels, intellectually, emotionally, everywhere. Physically, we don't have a craving for anything. And the final one is the balance of mind, Samatvam. There is nothing that can get us depressed or over-elated. We will be emotionally stable at all times. So this is what we would achieve. And then there is, from a nivritti standpoint, what are the things that would go away from us? Fear will go away, anxiety will go away, insecurity will go away, jealousy will go away, pride will go away, anger will go away. All those negative qualities would have left us. So this is Jivan Mukti. And Videha Mukti, we saw Videha Mukti is basically when we don't get reborn. We don't get reborn. So this Sthula Shariram, Sukshma Shariram and Karana Shariram, we saw the three bodies. The Sthula Shariram merges with the Sthula Prapancha. Sukshma Shariram merges with the Sukshma Prapancha. And the Karana Shariram merges with the Karana Prapancha. The Atma is all pervading anyway. It doesn't go away, it doesn't die, it doesn't need to merge with anything. It just remains. It is the only thing that is ever present. Atma or Brahman. So this is Videha Mukti. So remember, who are we? Jiva. Jiva has got two parts, the body, mind plus the Atma. The Atma reflects on the mind first, which is called as the reflected consciousness. In Sanskrita, we called it as Chidabhasa, Chit Abhasa. That the consciousness which is reflected is Chit Abhasa. This reflected consciousness on the mind makes the mind and body think that we are independent of another person. We have a separate entity. So this is Jiva. And once the knowledge comes that I am not the reflected consciousness, I am that original consciousness, then I don't own myself to this body. I will still be using this body. I will be still using this mind, but everything that is related to this body and mind becomes insignificant for me. Any problem that this body or mind has to face, it becomes insignificant to me. I am able to disassociate myself from this body and mind. Just like if anything happens to say this phone here, unless I have an attachment towards the phone, it is not going to create any problems for me. So in that same way, once I'm able to realize that I am that consciousness different from this body and mind, these problems, these life's problems that we face become insignificant. Just like when the sun rises, the candlelight is overshadowed. The candlelight is still there, but it is not as significant. It is as good as being not there. So similarly, with the discovery of this higher I, all these problems of samsara that we face today are not as good as they are. The inner freedom that I get, the shock absorber, the discoverer, with the discovery of the higher I, that independence makes all these issues really small. Just like for example, during the night time, we see so many stars on the sky. So if all our problems can be considered as the stars of the sky, there are innumerable problems in our life. Whatever we face on a daily basis, there are innumerable problems that we see in work, in every place, in personal life, with family, with friends, with neighbors, with health, with body, with our mind, with our own mind, and all those things. Now, the same stars remain as they are in the same sky, but during the daytime we do not see those stars because the sun's light overpowers all the stars. It is as though the stars do not exist during the day. In the same manner, once I discover myself to the higher I, all these problems become insignificant. This jnanam serves as an armor. So this is Jivan Mukti, and Videha Mukti is basically I am free from this cycle of birth and death. And there was a question asked as to what happens to the karma then, which is an important question, because this Videha Mukti can be only understood only when the law of karma is understood. So this law of karma is today's subject. The law of karma is very important subject to be understood. This would actually help us eliminate a lot of things, a lot of issues that we face in our daily life. It will help us to actually balance out our life. It will help us to actually deal with situations in a much more efficient and effective way. In much more mature manner, we would be able to handle people and situation. And there are principles to it. Let's take it. The first principle. There are 3 principles. Let's take the first principle. The first principle is, any action that I do willfully, it will produce 2 forms of result. Any action that any person does will have 2 forms of results. One is called as drishta palam, which is the visible result. Whatever I can see is drishta palam, and the other is invisible result, which is adrishta palam. So any action, there is a visible and an invisible result. And if the action is a good action, then there is a good visible and a good invisible result. So if I do good action, it's got a good visible and good invisible. And if there is a bad action, there will be a bad visible and bad invisible. So, but it can be mix and match also. There could be a good and bad. There could be good visible, bad invisible, good bad visible, and good invisible also. We will see how it comes. So, and for that example, suppose if I do a charity and I do it with my full, with full shraddha, and if I do the charity, the person who is actually enjoying, who is actually receiving and feels happy, and on seeing that happiness I become happy. That is the visible result, which is visible good. And then invisible, I will also get in future, I will get something positive out of it. But as I said, there can be also cases where there can be combination. Suppose if I cheat someone to earn some money, then the visible result is obviously good because I earn some money, I get some higher bank balance, I get some immediate money. But the invisible result is a negative result. And that negative result, that visible result which is seen by everybody, that is fine. The invisible result is what we call in our culture adrishtam. Adrishtam we say. So this adrishtam is the effect of an action that a karma produces. An action is also called as karma. We have seen that earlier. The karma or action will result in two things, two results. One is drishtam and adrishtam. The drishtam is visible, the adrishtam is invisible. The good invisible result is called as punya, and the bad invisible result is called as papa. So the sudrishtam, the good one, sudrishtam is punya, the durdrishtam is papa. So every action of ours produces visible result and also produces papa or punya. So this is the first law, first principle. The second principle is, we'll have to understand what produces papa and what produces punya. So the scripture says any action that is agreed or that is agreeable to the scriptures, or any action prescribed by the scriptures, if we do, it is punya. Whatever action we do which is prohibited by scriptures will produce papa. So any action that we do which is mentioned by the scriptures has something that has to be done, all the Panchamahayajnas and all those things, it is called as, it results in punya. Whatever scripture says do not do, and if we do it, then it results in papa. Then what about neutral activities? Some may ask, I'm going to travel by train or take a walk. This is neither prescribed by the scriptures nor prohibited by the scriptures. Then what happens here? Then here the norm is based on the motive. So what is the motive of my actions? If the motive of my actions is good and noble, then that karma will produce punya. If the motive of the action is not noble, then that produces papa. So this is the second principle. So what decides punya or papa? Whatever scriptures say if we do, it is punya. Whatever scriptures say don't do, and if we do it, it is papa. In those things where we are not sure or where it is not mentioned in the scriptures, then it is it is decided by the motive or the attitude. This is the second principle. So first principle is every action produces drishtam and adrishtam. Adrishtam is punyam or papam. Punyam or papam is decided based on the second principle, that punyam or papam is decided based on the whether it is allowed by scriptures or not, or by the motive. Now the third principle is, okay, I have collected punya or papa. How does that work? All this invisible punya or papa will be converted to either sukha or dukkha. Drishta sukham. It will be converted, this invisible punyam will be converted into visible joy. the invisible papam will be converted to visible sorrow. So it will give us drishta sukham or drishta dukkham. So this is the third principle. Punya will convert itself into joy. Papa will convert itself into sorrow. Now the next question is, how long will this take? How long will that action that has produced that invisible adrishta palam, which is punyam or papam, how long will it take to convert itself into drishta sukham or drishta papam, drishta dukkham? The duration for that conversion is not uniform. It is not following any LIFO principle, last in first out, or FIFO principle, first in first out. That kind of thing doesn't happen. A punyam that we do today can result in a adrishta sukham tomorrow itself, or it can come to the next year, next life. It can be any time. It can be next year. There is no single law governing everything there. And the duration will not be known to us at all. We humans, we try to link it up, thinking, oh, remember he is suffering now, that's because that is Papa, and that is what we are trying to tell to ourselves. But there is no logic that has been given in the Shastras which will be able to link these two up. So some punyams can give immediate sukham, and some punyams can give delayed sukham. And again, whenever these kind of things comes, Shastra explains us through an analogy. So how can I believe that the same adrishtam, how can it take different times for different actions? The example that the Shastra gives is the different types of seeds, if we are planting on the same day, will not give me a fruit within the same time. A papaya seed or a mango seed or a coconut seed, if I plant it, each one gives at a different times. The date of planting could be the same, the soil is the same, but the different seeds will take different times to become full-fledged results. So in the same way, different actions will produce different duration. And so, as I said, the fructification time for these karma is not known, and therefore some fructification can happen in our next lives also. In fact, we can be sure that it can have, many of it happens in the next life. You hold on to this thought, I'll explain to you how. You remember that this body that we get is made of these panchabhutas, which is akasha, vayu, apaha, agni, apaha, prithvi. So this body is made of panchabhutas. Now this body is needed for us to enjoy sukham or dukkham. Any joy or sorrow has to be experienced through a body. And this body itself is got by our punya or papa only. So this, whatever body we get, whether it is a male body, female body, healthy body, unhealthy body, color, height, whatever body characteristics that we get is a result of papa or punya only. So when I am born, I have not done any punya or papa at that point of time in that life. So, but still I am able to get a body. So this itself explains to me that my body, there are unfructified karmas of my previous birth, which is the cause of getting me this body. So which means So, or not all the karma that I had done in my previous lives had exhausted. And some of it are being used in this life to give me this body. So that is the reason why we can actually extend any karma that I do in this life need not be fructified in this life itself. It can be held back, and it can be only, it can produce a drishta sukham or dukkham in my next lives. And remember, I said we need bodies to enjoy. When we discussed this Stula Shariram, we saw it as Bhoga Ayatanam. We saw that Bhoga Ayatanam means it is an instrument. It is the residence for enjoyment. So as I can enjoy, I can either have experience joy or sorrow only through this physical body. The moment this body is gone, the Sukshma Sharira does not have the capacity to experience joy or sorrow. So, and different bodies are made to enjoy different types of joy and sorrow. An animal body, certain animals will have a certain, suppose if as they say in Shastra, suppose if a person loves to sleep too much, then the body that can actually help them to enjoy the sleep very much would be a cat's body. So if a person wants to has taken the sankalpa of actually enjoying only sleep, then the Shastras will say, okay, better have a cat body, a body of a cat, because you will be able to enjoy sleep much better. So different bodies have different capacity to enjoy or experience different joys and sorrow. And this is being given by what is the result of what is the punyam or papam that is made available to us at that point of time. So that punyam and papam will decide on the type of body that I take. So, and if I actually have some unfructified papa or punya, I will have to experience it. The adrishta palam has to be experienced. I cannot avoid experiencing adrishta palam, whether it is punya or papa, whether it is joy or sorrow. If I have done an action and that has resulted in an adrishta palam, I have to experience it. I cannot avoid it. Nobody can avoid it. And therefore, to experience that punyam or papam, to experience that sukham or dukkham, I will have to take, if I am not able to exhaust all the karmas in this life, I will have to take another body in my next life to experience that joy or sorrow. So which means this law of karma basically necessitates, it basically says that repeated birth and death is inevitable. There will be a long chain of birth and death, because I will be, while I am experiencing the previous births, punyam or papam, in the form of sukham and dukkham, at the same time I am also acting in this life. And while I am acting on it, I am also accumulating adrishta palam from those actions. And therefore, not every action, not every adrishtam is going to be fructified in this life. Some of it are going to be kept out. And therefore, to experience those unfructified punyam or papam, I will have to necessarily take another birth, another body. I will have to go through another birth and death cycle. So this is the corollary that we can gain out of the three principles. Every action produces visible and invisible result. Invisible result is drishtam. Invisible result is called adrishtam, and it can be either punyam or papam. Punyam will result in sukham or joy. Papam will result in dukkham. And any sukham or dukkham will have to be experienced through the body. That body is decided by the type of experience that you are going to have. And because of this, and the fructification of the punyam or papam is not the same across all actions, across all people, it can never be linked back. So these are the principles of karma that we have to understand. And now, what is the advantage of this understanding? Because if I am able to do a vichara on this, if I am able to assimilate this, I can bring in some changes in my attitude. And what are those? We will try to do it. Number one, the foremost thing is, it will help me. The first advantage is that this law of karma will help me to explain the disparity and differences in the living beings, right? So some are animals, some are plants, some are human beings. Among human beings, some are born rich, some are born poor. So this disparity or differences that we see, this can be explained by law of karma. If I do not use the law of karma to explain this, I will have to resort to the principle of chance. Oh, Ishvara thought this person should be born as a plant, this person should be born as a rich person, this person, Ishvara decided on this. This will make it as a kind of a chance. It's not following any norm, and it makes Ishvara look very bad. It looks as if he is very partial. But creation, we saw, is governed by laws. The entire creation, whether it is magnetic laws, the sun being in the center of the universe is a law. It doesn't go away from it. It doesn't move. The earth rotating around itself is a law. It doesn't change. The number of hours doesn't change. It going around the sun doesn't change. The moon revolving around the earth does not change. Everything is the gravitational force. There is a law. Magnetic force that are available in this universe. There is a law. Science has got a lot of laws, and a lot of laws have got all those fixed formulas. Those don't change. So we can understand from here that the creation is governed by laws. And whenever there is law, there is order. And similarly, all these disparities also cannot be then attributed to chance or choice. It can be only attributed to a law. And that law, this law of karma, clearly explains why this disparity or these differences are there among the living beings. That's the first one. The second advantage is the law of karma helps in accepting the inexplicable, we'll say, or unexplainable sufferings. When I am going through a suffering, when I am not able to accept my problems, when I ask, why me? This law of karma will help in accepting those things. I can be very sure that I am responsible for every one of my suffering that I go through. Either through my immediate past actions or through my remote past actions. Whatever sufferings I get, is because of my actions alone. The thing is, I may not remember which remote past action is responsible for my current state. Be it good or bad, we don't know. For good, we do not ask the question at all. We think we deserve it. Suppose if I am I'm now in an air-conditioned room, I think I deserve that. I don't even think about which particular action could have cost me, why me. I don't ask that. Why is that I am actually asked to stay in this air-conditioned room? I don't question that. But when I am going through a suffering, when I am going through a problem, I ask that question, why me? And I try to ask myself, I have not done anything bad in my life, and I will try to justify why I should not be suffering. But the problem is, even whether in this life or in the past lives, we will not be able to find the link. And I can now be clear that I am the cause of whatever I am going through. So I will not blame anyone in this world. Blaming is the most natural tendency for every one of us. We try to blame others. So this law of karma will help us in understanding those sufferings that we go through. And what happens when we get into a suffering, when we go through a problem, there are two problems for us. One is that resistance. Actually, going through a problem is not samsara. According to our scriptures, going through a problem is not called samsara. The resistance to that problem, I am getting unhappy about that problem that I am going through. I try to blame others. I try to, I crib. I complain. I get into depression. That portion, that resistance is called as samsara. So that resistance, that cribbing, that blaming will reduce once I understand the law of karma. And therefore my samsara will also reduce. And the second thing is, once I know that I will not blame anyone, I will have to take responsibility for my actions. So I will have to take responsibility for my actions, so that also will improve. So this is the second advantage. Explaining or accepting the sufferings. Then the third one is, my faith in Ishvara will not be shaken. So once I accept the law of karma, I will not have any problem in Shraddha. Because sometimes I know that even though I am a good person now, if I suffer, my suffering is because of my past and not because of an unjust Ishvara. If I understand the law of karma, I will not blame Ishvara for all my problems. The thing is, remember, the most convenient thing that we do in our life is, whenever we are getting into a problem, we try to look around whom we can blame. If we are able to blame others, we try to blame others immediately. If not, if there is nobody else to blame, we try to put the blame on Ishvara. We try to put the blame saying that you are unjust, you don't know, I am actually a nice guy, you are actually trying to, get me into problems. All those things. This suffering is all because of you, because you are unjust, and all those things. Now, if I understand this law of karma, I will not blame Ishvara. I will not say that the Ishvara is unjust. I will understand that the suffering is because of my remote past actions. I don't know. I could have been such a bad person in my previous life. I will never know that. Just because I am in this place, in this kind of environment, and I also feel that those kind of people are wrong, those kind of people who are doing bad are wrong, doesn't necessarily explain that I may not have been born like the other person in my previous life. I could have been born as anybody in my previous life. I don't know. So we will not try to put the blame on Ishvara. We just don't remember. Remember, Ishvara can never be unjust. In fact, there is no injustice in this world at all. People say, oh, it is so unjust, this person, especially when tsunami hits or all those things, people say, oh, Ishvara has been cruel. It is so unjust. There is no injustice. This is a very important one, because many religious people also, they do not understand the law of karma, and therefore they in turn blame Ishvara for everything. And some people I know, even some examples, people who have turned atheist because something bad happened in their life. And as I said, and something, when this is what I don't understand, because if something bad happens and that actually allows us to turn atheist, it should have happened the moment I see something bad in anybody's life. Somewhere I see something bad and I say, how can Ishvara be unjust, and therefore I should turn atheist? But these people will not turn atheist until something bad happens in their lives. So that means you are. It is not that you never had belief in Ishvara in the first place then. Because while you were able to accept the injustice for other person, and the moment the injustice happens on you, then you don't accept it. And then you think the Ishvara is not there. There is no Ishvara, or the Ishvara is unjust. It is not logic. It doesn't seem to add up for me. Anyway, so that is the third advantage, that faith in Ishvara will not be shaken. The fourth advantage is, if I accept the law of karma, then I can take responsibility for my future. I can take charge of my life. So when I say my present situation is because of my past action, then my present action will decide the future situation. So that I will know. So I will try to live intelligently in the present, so that I can influence my future. If I cannot totally control it, at least I will be able to influence it. Thus, I can avert fatalism. I can accept my free will. Some people say it's all my fate. It's all my fate. It's already given. And Ishvara has given. They don't even say that it is the result of my actions. They say this is what has been given to me in this life. As if Ishvara has decided for them and said, okay, here is your chit, you will have to live this life. Here is your horoscope, you live this life. The horoscope is probably right, but it is reflecting what you are going to go through in this life, but it is a result of what you have done in the past. So the law of karma basically restores my free will. It averts all my fatalistic tendencies. Some people think law of karma leads to fatalism. No, actually, if a person who has understood law of karma properly will understand that fate is nothing there. There is only my free will is there. The free will of my present becomes the fate of my future. Or the fate of what I am going through now is the free will of my past. So I alone am responsible for my situation through my past actions. And therefore I alone can be responsible for my future also. If I don't accept this, then somebody else becomes responsible for my situation. If somebody else becomes responsible for my situation, so I can be responsible for somebody else's situation, then it becomes totally chaotic. And that is not how the creation is meant to be. The creation is governed by laws. So law of karma, I will ensure that there is nothing is chance. You know, the word luck in English is game of chance, they say, whereas we call it as adrishtam. There is no equivalent word for luck. The only word that we have in our culture is adrishtam. Adrishtam is what we call as the second invisible result of my action. So it is already given that is either going to be a punya or a papa, and that is going to fructify at a particular point of time. So there are no coincidences. There are no chances. Everything is a result of my action alone. Only thing, I don't know when I committed that action. So this is a fourth advantage. I take responsibility for my future. Then the fifth one is, this is quite one of the fundamental questions asked by many people, including especially the youngsters, We talk about having an ethical way of life, good way of life. And they say, if you say ethical life is actually a blessing and unethical life is harmful, how come there are so many good people who are suffering, and how come so many corrupt people seem to be enjoying their life? First thing is, law of karma explains this easily. The present ethical person is suffering because of his past unethical action. The thing that we don't understand here is, or the thing that we think is, because he is ethical in this present life, he should have been ethical in his previous lives also. And therefore, what he goes through now does not seem to add up. That is the wrong calculation that we are making. And because he is unethical, corrupt in this life, he should have been unethical, corrupt in his previous life also, or he wouldn't have done anything good in his life. And therefore, whatever enjoyment he's going through doesn't seem to add up, is what we conclude. Both these conclusions are wrong. We cannot link them up, or we cannot even say what they were in their previous lives. So the present ethical person who is suffering now is because of his past unethical action. And the present corrupt person, bad person who is going through a good life is because he has done something good in his past, and therefore he is enjoying this. So this law of karma actually then is required for moral order in society. There has to be this law of karma which has to be clearly explained to the people, so that that morality will take precedence. Because people know that they cannot get away. There is no way to get away in this universe. You are going to be reborn one way or the other. And you will have to go through. There are countless sayings for this, but we still don't fully grasp this law of karma. We say, what you sow, so you reap. Murpagal seyyin pirpagal vilayum. Teedum nandrum pirardara vara. There are so many sayings which explain this law of karma that have been taught to us in various forms of sutras and sayings to us, but we still don't seem to get it. But if we are able to get it, these 5 advantages are there. So, law of karma is important. The first advantage, it explains the differences and disparity. Whatever we see in this world, we are able to explain. Second, my faith on Ishvara will not be shaken. I know what he is doing. I know I am responsible. So that is the third one. I take responsibility for my actions. And the moment I take responsibility of my actions, I also know that I can decide my future. And then, of course, I can also understand why certain people are suffering, including me or somebody else. Whoever is suffering is, or whoever is enjoying, is because of what? So this is the law of karma. Now, karma action. Now we'll come back to this Videha Mukti. The question that was asked was, what happens to the karma of this person? Suppose if a person goes through, there is always this karma which is He has accumulated, this person has accumulated over life, which we said that one cannot exhaust in the current life itself. Then it has to be carried forward to the next life. What happens to a jnani's karma then? A person who has attained moksha, what happens to his karma? So for that, first we will understand karma has got, there are three portions of karma, or three, all the accumulated karma is divided into three. All the accumulated punya or papa, let me say, punya or papa, all the accumulated adrishtam is divided into three. The first one is sanchita karma. Sanchita karma. Sanchita means accumulated. So whatever a jiva has accumulated as part of the actions, all these get accumulated into a, let's say for example, we will put it in equivalent term is bank balance. There is a bank balance. That bank balance is called as sanchita karma. Then there is something called maturing karma. So within the bank balance there is a fixed deposit for which at the fixed deposit you will mature, or you make a basically a withdrawal. That withdrawal is called as prarabdha. The prarabdha is the karma that is given to us when we are born. Whenever we are taking a new body, we are given a set of prarabdha, or rather the prarabdha will decide the body that we will get. Right from the body that we will get, the childhood we will have, the parents that we will have, the neighbors we will have, the type of upbringing that we will have, the kind of food that we will get, the kind of love and care that we will get in our childhood, all those things, because until the time that we have not done any papa or punya willingly, will have to be based on the prarabdha karma that has been accumulated or that has been withdrawn from our sanchita karma. So this prarabdha will decide this life. So sanchita is bank balance, prarabdha is the withdrawal for this life. And this prarabdha will decide on the type of body that I am getting, all the food that the parents and all those things, including the time of my death and all those things is probably given out, laid out. What kind of sufferings I may have, what kind of enjoyment I have to go through. This is called as prarabdha. And once we get into this life, we are going to do a lot of deliberate actions. We are going to do willing actions. Many of them to hurt others, and many of them to help others. And some of them to hurt others but make it look as if it is nice. And some of it are neutral actions. All these actions are going to produce another set of karma, which is called as agami. Agami is the result of these actions. So some of these agami karmas will get exhausted in this life itself, and some of this karma will get carried into your sanchita. So sanchita, it gets accumulated into the bank balance again. So you make some money in this life, some punya or papa. You can either exhaust it in this life. The choice is not with us though. And some of it is carried forward. So we have sanchita, prarabdha and agami. In the case of an ignorant person, an ajnani, a person who has not got jnanam, who has not attained moksha, this continues. So the sanchita gets accumulated. The next life he gets another new prarabdha. He tries to exhaust it. While he is exhausting the prarabdha, he will have agami, which gets again accumulated into the sanchita, out of which a portion of it is again withdrawn for the next life. And the Sanchita is huge. Sanchita is huge. It cannot be exhausted totally in one life. It's not possible. So what happens for a jnani? And this, remember, this karma is for what? We saw the body has to be there for you to have it, and it is at the level of the body and mind. What happens for a jnani is the jnani attains. One jnani is able to understand or is able to own up to the original consciousness, Brahman, Atma. So the moment he owns up to the original consciousness, he does not identify himself with this body and mind. Therefore, any action that he does does not acquire any karma, because there is no agami for that, because the agami is only at the body and mind. For the jnani, he does not, once after becomes a jnani, there is no agami karma, because he does not own up to this body and mind. Once he actually attains jnanam and his body and sukshma shariram, stula shariram merges with the totality, sukshma karana shariram merges with the totality, the sanchita karma is gone. It is gone, just like in a dark room. If a room full of darkness is your sanchita karma, the moment you switch on a light, the darkness is gone. Where did the darkness go? It's gone. Similarly, for a jnani, the moment the light of knowledge, the jnana comes in, the sanchita karma is burnt. Agami is avoided, sanchita is burnt. Now what remains is only prarabdha. And for a jnani, he has to go through that prarabdha. The prarabdha is given, it has been already released from the bow. The arrow has been already released from the bow. So this arrow will have to do its job. So the jnani will go through the prarabdha. He will have to go through those joyful and painful situations in life, except that it will not impact him, because he will understand it is at the body level, it is at the mind level. He is immunized against prarabdha. So for a jnani, prarabdha is exhausted. He will go through that prarabdha. We have seen Ramana Maharishi having cancer. He had to be operated upon. We cannot say, oh, once he is a jnani, he should not go through any body trouble. That is not true. That is, prarabdha have to be experienced by every body in this world. So the prarabdha will have to be exhausted. So prarabdha is exhausted, agami is avoided, sanchita is burnt. So for a jnani, there is no karma. And there is no karma, there is no birth. There is no punyam or papam. There is no need to acquire another birth. There is no need to acquire another body. So therefore, the Videha Mukti is explained. So this is the law of karma and the Videha Mukti for jnani. So with this, we come to the end of this introduction to Vedanta series. We started from what is the purpose of human birth, from there until the goal, the final goal, which is moksha, and the benefit of moksha, including the karma theory. Om Tat Sat. Any questions? So the next two classes, next two sessions, we will make it open, we will make it free, willing conversation. how can an ethical person reduce his sufferings in this birth, which he is experiencing now? The first and foremost way that a person can reduce the sufferings is bhakti. If you really look at it, the more a person has got devotion, the less suffering he will experience. From an outside person, it might look as though he is suffering, but for a person who is actually soaked in bhakti, it will not look like suffering. And we have many such examples in the past of all those people who, whether it is Purandaradasa or Tukaram or any of those people who have been soaked in bhakti, they seem to have gone through a very difficult life. For an outsider, it looks as though they have been going through a difficult phase of life. But for themselves, they were actually soaked in bhakti. They did not feel any suffering. Remember, suffering, sorrow is all subjective. As they say, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Different people have different levels of tolerance. And the idea is to actually improve the tolerance, improve titiksha. So, a person with a spiritual, ethical person, if he turns to spirituality, it will help him to reduce his sufferings. Because spirituality teaches him on titiksha. Bhakti, titiksha will help us in terms of reducing the suffering. Of course, the karma theory also will help you to reduce the suffering. Because suffering, as I say, pain you will have to go through. Suffering, mental suffering is optional. So that can be managed. I heard that jnanis happily undergo sufferings as they consider that their prarabdha is consumed quickly. Yes, I mean actually there is no happily undergoing sufferings at all for a jnani. As I said, jnani is unaffected. There is nothing for them to make them happy. Oh, prarabdha is going fast, I am happy. Oh, prarabdha is delayed, I am unhappy. There is no such feeling for them. For a jnani, it is nothing. It is BAU, business as usual, or it is just like, okay, I go through a dream. The dream person will have to go through these things. So this body and mind will have to go through. But they do not have any resistance to any prarabdha sufferings. In our case, we ajnanis, we try to resist suffering. All our lives, throughout our life, the only thing that we are trying to chase joy, we are trying to escape suffering. We try to chase happiness, we try to avoid sadness. This is what we are tuned to do. As we spiritually get mature, we will slowly be not chasing happiness, and we will also slowly not try to avoid unhappiness. That is the spiritual maturity. And for a jnani, the final stage is he does not chase happiness, he does not avoid unhappiness also.
So, agami is both positive and negative. Both are.
Thank you so much. Much to contemplate and translate. Thank you. How does the avatars and gods manifesting and the gods we worship fit in this Brahman concept? Good question. It is actually a long answer for me. It is also explained in chapter 4 of Gita. So when we do Gita, probably it will be much more in detail. But what I can tell you is avatars are different from jivas. We have to understand avatars are different from jivas. Avatars come out of that maya directly. Jivas come out of karma. Ours are driven by karma. Avatars are driven directly out of Maya. They do not fit because if they take a life of a human, which is the case of Rama or Krishna, they will have a prarabdha defined to that body and they will go through that prarabdha, but they do not have any agami and they do not have any kind of sanchita to go with, but they will try to play this part as a human being, but they don't have any rebirth as such. So this is the answer from this class standpoint, because we discussed karma, all those things. But as I said, and from a birth body standpoint, as I said, that body is called Mayika Shariram. Their body comes out of Maya directly. Our bodies come from Panchabhutas. So that is the difference. More, I think it will be better if we discuss this in the chapter 4 of Gita. Is doing Shanti to get out of Prarabdha postponement of sufferings? Good question. Again, we'll discuss this in chapter 3 when we discuss karma, chapter 3 of Gita. But always Prarabdha, whatever we do as when we go to the astrologer and we do something parihara, as they call, we are converting that, we are trying to convert our prarabdha into a different prarabdha. Now, how much of it is actually converted, how much of it is not convertible, we don't know. We think we have been able to, but nobody can be sure. Actually speaking, some of the prarabdhas are called prabala prarabdhas. Some of the prarabdhas are minor prarabdhas. Minor prarabdhas can be changed or can be avoided or can be, with the blessing of some spiritually mature master, guru, Swami, we see in their life, they can try to alter, they will be able to alter some of the minor prarabdhas. But that will also result in another set of prarabdha, which we may have to give as a result. That's why jnanis or any of the spiritually mature person, not even jnanis, if a person is deep into the spiritual path, they will not try to alter prarabdhas. Because once you try to alter prarabdhas, there is a different price to pay for it. And some of the prabala prarabdhas are unalterable. Say a person, if it's a minor prarabdha, I have to get wet in the rain today. And through my parihara or through a blessing, when I go out in the rain, I might get somebody who actually holds an umbrella for me, or in such a way that I don't get fully wet, or I might get some shade in the tree. So this is an alteration of a slight alteration of the prarabdha itself. So that is possible through parihara, but we are not sure as to which of those prarabdhas can be altered and which of it cannot be, and how much of it is alterable. There are stories. Okay, thank you. Looking forward to the Gita class. There are stories of Periva blessings impacting lives. A child who could not talk suddenly starts talking. Are these prarabdha which can be changed? As I said, yes. So some of the prarabdhas can be changed. A jnani or a spiritually mature person who has got this capacity can alter some prarabdhas, but there would be a price to pay. Karma, there is always a price to pay. We don't know what would have been the price to pay, but these jnanis are capable of, these jnanis / I would say Siddha Purusha. These are all part of certain powers that a person who has lived a life of tapas gets it. We have seen in our when we have read Amar Chitra Katha in younger class, how the Rakshasas have done tapas. The tapas will bestow us upon some powers. That powers we will be able to, these jnanis do not use for their own personal benefit, but they try to make certain, devotees' life better. But there would be always a small price to pay. We do not know what is the price that have been paid. But prarabdha can be altered by those people. Those Siddha Purushas. And normally a spiritually mature person, a Siddha Purusha, will not use these powers to alter their prarabdha. They will not try to alter their own prarabdha. If Ramana Maharishi or Mahapariva would have, with so much of powers, they could have altered the sufferings that they had gone through in their lives. They will not. Mahapariva was, had fever for many days, many times, or he's had a cataract operation, his eyesight failed. He did not use on it. Ramana Maharishi, who had blessed so many of people, he could have altered his cancer, but he did not. So a mature person will not try to alter the course of prarabdha. As I said, maybe the prarabdha is altered in such a way that in this life their life becomes easy, but in the next life it becomes difficult. Or in this life itself, in future, it becomes difficult. Altering a course of prarabdha is, as another person said, is a postponement of suffering, or it is either a postponement of suffering or it is a change where another prarabdha comes in, but you may have to go through some other issues. Finally, it is just my attitude that matters in handling my karma. It is just my attitude that matters in handling my karma. That is true. In fact, our prarabdha decides not just the body, it also decides on the people that we are going to interact, on the people that we will be able to interact, the kind of person that we will face. It actually has a say around everything. The prarabdha has got a say. I don't say it fully does. Has got a say on everything. And what is our prarabdha? It is a combination of our action, our desires, all those put together, our vasanas, our samskaras, that put together become what we are experiencing in this life. The more deeper we go into spirituality, the more easier, the more clearer it becomes in terms of understanding this life. Yes, Gita makes it more clearer. Taking medications for illness also will lead to prarabdha, I understand. Can you help me understand this better? I mean, I'm not able to understand this question. Trying to alter the suffering. Yes, I mean, taking medications, for example, the medication will have its own side effects. So the side effects is altering the prarabdha, but you will go through the side effects. And as I said, I mean, some of the medication would work now, but the same medication will not work. So if I'm getting a headache now, I'm actually taking medicine, it works. 2 days later, I'm having a headache, I'm taking the same medicine, it doesn't work. So some prarabdha are prabala prarabdha and some are not. Would there be some range limit of sanchita above which form of human birth goes to non-human? It is not the sanchita which decides a human birth, as I said. Sanchita is not the one which decides. The prarabdha is the one which decides what kind of body we get. The sanchita is huge. From there, a portion is plucked. That becomes prarabdha. The prarabdha decides whether you have done, what kind, within the prarabdha, how much of punya or papa you have. If too much of punya, you get higher births. If too much of papa, you get lower births. If you get somewhere in the middle, you get human. And if you get human, within that humans, how much of punya decides what kind of life you are going to have, what kind of upbringing you are going to have. So it is not the sanchita but the prarabdha. So in the prarabdha, if the punya and papa are around the same, it is human, almost are in the same middle range. If it is too much of punya, then you take higher forms, Devaloka and others. If it is too much of papa, then you take animal, insects and all those forms. Okay? Okay. If there are no more questions, then we can take more questions, as I said, in the next 2 sessions. So next 2 sessions we will make it interactive. You can speak from any subject, whatever we had discussed so far. You can give your thoughts, reflections, feedback, questions and all those things. Thank you. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahimahishah. Gobhramanebhyo Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah.